Hello, my name's Rosalind Gill and I'm one of the co-editors of this book, Gender in an Era of Post-Truth Populism, and I'm absolutely gutted not to be there with you at the launch, so I'm recording this very brief message from my kitchen in London. And I just wanted to say two things. So firstly, I think that the book is ever more urgently needed. The questions that it's asking and interrogating are becoming ever more pressing and frightening. And I'm speaking, of course, from Liz Truss's Britain, with its dramatically heightened social inequalities and its social injustices and its devastating cruelties, its racism, its misogyny, its homophobia and transphobia, its attacks on disabled people, and most visibly in the last week or so, the devastating attacks on the poor and on working class working people. And in the context of the rise of the right more generally and the rise of populism across the world, then I think the book hopefully joins an ongoing conversation with other academic work, journalistic work, activist work in interrogating this moment and raising questions about it. And then secondly, just on a more celebratory note, I wanted to say what a pleasure it's been to work with Penny Jane Burke and Julia Coffey and Akane Kanai on putting together this volume and working with our awesome contributors who've made it what it is. And that's been a great pleasure and an honour. And I'd also like to thank the other people who've done so much behind the scenes, but whose names are not on the cover or in the contents page, but whose work's been absolutely vital. We really appreciate it. So have a great launch, enjoy it, really wish I was there, and bye from my kitchen.
Hi everyone, hope you're having a wonderful time at the launch. If I haven't had the opportunity to meet you in person, which is a lot of you, my name is Akane, I'm one of the editors of the book, and I just wanted to say it was a great pleasure working on this book and working with your wonderful contributions. I think as time goes on, we've all been seeing how there are very complex questions of gender, truth, and authority that keep on being raised in our current educational environments, and for me, particularly in social media environments, as that is the area of my own research. And so I think it is sobering, but also I think something to be really proud of, that we've been able to make an intervention in the form of this book. So thank you so much for your contributions, and I hope to meet you all at some point in the future.
Hello, I am Mrs. Giraldo. I'm a teacher and a researcher at the University of Lausanne, and I'm going to introduce the chapter I wrote for Gender in an Era of Post-Truth Populism. My chapter addresses the weaponization of gender on both sides of the Atlantic in the last decades and via attacks structured around the gender theory and gender ideology tropes. I posit that this weaponization is the most visible face of what I identify as current ideological struggles that are taking place at a global scale. My argument is twofold. First, I claim that although gender is the entry point for the articulation of these attacks, what is at stake goes well beyond so as to encompass social justice. Second, that these attacks do not exemplify neither emerge from a so-called populist present, but rather during the 60s from the top down and in reaction to challenges to the Roman Catholic orthodoxy articulated from the periphery of world Catholicism, notably the theology of liberation that emerged in Latin America. As such, they do not reinforce and neither mobilize a flagrant anti-intellectual sentiment, but encapsulate informed theological arguments. Further, rather than having or even pretending to have the people's interests at heart, they emerge and encompass an elitist defense of social hierarchies from within Catholicism, Christianity, that is shared at the liberal secular end of the ideological spectrum. These attacks The current ones, as much as the previous ones, aim at making a strong case for oppression, social injustice, and the exploitation of people on Earth. They seek to counter the pedagogies of empathy, justice, and care that have been advanced by feminist, anti-racist, anti-colonial activists and scholars for decades, and thanks to which certain though limited gains have been made. Moreover, the active denigration of the very fact of having empathy at the core of these attacks, and which is done via the coining, reappropriation, deployment, and weaponization of a number of terms such as woke, snowflake, virtue signaling, social justice warrior, grievance studies, is a specific strategy to train people to accept exploitation, hierarchies, and injustice. The aim of such ideological work is to foster and expand the human capacity for cruelty that is necessary for the colonial capitalist system to thrive. I read this as a contemporary and very concrete manifestation of what Rita Segato denotes as pedagogies of cruelty. Finally, my chapter also enacts a critique of the usual liberal and Europe-centered framework of analysis from which the weaponization of gender has been addressed, thus arguing for an overhauling of the theoretical frameworks in dominant Anglo-American scholarship.
Persuasion, patience, and persistence, part character qualities, part doggedness, and part skill, underpinned by a healthy dose of determination. In my chapter, I critically reflect on my experience as an Aboriginal Australian academic with quite some experience now teaching Indigenous studies in Australian universities, and more recent experiences leading Indigenous-learning teaching initiatives. Many universities in Australia are now focusing on embedding Indigenous content and disciplinary curricula to remedy existing absences and silences in relation to Indigenous knowledges and perspectives. Giving voice to Indigenous truth, though, can be challenging at a time when truth is increasingly under pressure and post-truth ideas are less dependent on fact or accuracy and are more reliant on emotion and existing belief. I take the opportunity in the chapter to explore three key challenges of my work, which I call persuasion, patience, and persistence. As you'll see in the chapter, I consider these challenges part of my work and critical to reframing, thinking, building understanding, and entrenching Indigenous curricula into the fabric of an institution. However, for most Indigenous academics in Australia, and around 2/3 of those identify as female, this work is additional to the usual academic responsibilities and can sometimes impede career trajectories. I hope you enjoy the chapter. Actually, I hope someone reads the chapter. Thank you.
Absolutely an honor to have been invited to be a contributor to this really important collection of not only chapters on gender in an era of post-truth, populism and pedagogies and challenges, but also what are the ways in which these post-truth populisms are affecting schools today. And as a feminist teacher who has been in the high school English classroom in the US and specifically in New York for the last 25 years, contributing a chapter such as this at this stage of my own career as a teacher, as an emerging scholar, as a doctoral student about to finish, my chapter titled Embodied Willfulness, Me Too Girls Activism, Affects, and Complaint as Feminist Pedagogy is as much a lodging of my own complaint against the ways in which harm is done every day to young people in schools, not only in the context of the chapter that I wrote, but in the everyday of our current kind of political and social landscape that young people are in today, and that I am bearing witness to in their storytelling, in their truth-telling, in their activism, in their school-based activism, and in the ways in which their bodies in particular are a part of the ways in which they enact those activisms. So my chapter on embodied willfulness specifically traces one young woman's my own student, Gabby, and her school-based activism at the high school where I teach and where she went to school a number of years ago. It happened to be during the fall of 2016, when at the height of the kind of Clinton-Trump election cycle. And at that time, we actually discovered that our school did not have a sexual harassment policy to protect students from sexual harassment from either their peers and or their teachers. And so when we discovered this, in the midst of a 3-day rape culture course I was teaching, students essentially mobilized. And I was also simultaneously teaching a women of color feminisms class, focusing on Black and Latina intersectional feminisms to high school students. And the young women, the girls who had been in the rape culture class, essentially kind of traveled over into my feminism course, and they mobilized those students to then speak out and truth tell and essentially tell the entire school that we discovered there was no policy. And so what the chapter does is it traces, in particular, Gabby's own activist enactments, willful enactments, embodied enactments, about her own experience of having been sexually harassed at school by both peers and teachers, and her own kind of stance, both physically, emotionally, intellectually, psychically, how she navigated the stage at that time, which was literally an assembly that we put on for the entire school community. But then also how she navigated it through her writing, through her blogging, digital activism, other ways in which her the affects of her embodied willfulness, both on stage and in her activism, were essentially pedagogies that moved into the room and the spaces she was in order to push back and resist the silence and surveillance of our activism. And so I hope that this chapter really is a kind of not only a testimony and a witnessing of Gabby's activism, but also a kind of living complaint, a living, as Sarah Ahmed would say, feminist pedagogy as complaint, and using it as a kind of living, bearing witness to the ways in which young people are literally using their bodies to not only transform and make change, but also to work in solidarity with each other and to show and manifest that solidarity as transformative ways to reimagine how school can be not only places of learning, so to speak, but also places of liberation and emancipation from harm and violence in their everyday lives, and bringing in instead care and love and justice. So I hope we all keep fighting the good fight from wherever we are across the world with each other. Let's really do this together in solidarity. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Tanya Nguyen, and I'll be saying a few things about my book chapter titled Populist Politics in a Market-Leninist State, Rethinking Gender in Vietnam, authored by me and Dr. Matthew McDonald. As the edited collection poses a broad-scale question on what it means to be pedagogical in a post-truth landscape, our chapter focuses on the populist political strategy and techniques that have been deployed by the Vietnamese government that subject women to state control over the past 4 decades. This serves to smoothen the political and economic transitioning of the country of the late 20th century and the early 21st century. We detail the various cultural campaigns that were carried out by the state and its related organizations in the 90s, mobilizing patriarchal family values to appeal to the country's conservative constituents, as well as to reassert its autocratic control. Another important argument that we put forward in this chapter is that there has been a very distinct form of populist politics deployed by the Vietnamese government that need to be understood within the geopolitical and social cultural context of Vietnam as a post-war and a post-socialist country.
Hello, and we're so delighted to be with you for the launch of this fabulous book, Gender in an Era of Post-Truth Populism. Congratulations to our dear editors for their marvellous job on getting this wonderful work out into the world. Warmest congratulations. I'm sorry we are not there in person. I'm with Meta.
So our chapter is called Embracing Feral Pedagogies, Queer Feminist Education Through Queer Performance. That's written by Alison Campbell and myself, as well as Stephen Farrier and Hannah McCann. And it's really about the idea of, an aspirational practice really of going feral. Do you want to say a bit more?
Yeah, and going feral really was the idea that we see ourselves as quite domesticated into the institution, and that one way as queer identifying academics and thinkers and performance makers that we could respond to that was to essentially take whatever we could get from the university and take it back out to the queer community or go feral. We do this through an event called Feral Queer Camp, which is when we get a group of people who choose to come and perhaps make a utopian curriculum of their own design with us around a queer arts festival, and we see a lot of work together and just talk through various ways that we can analyse that. And really it's around capacity building in terms of the queer community being able to articulate what is happening in queer performance for ourselves. So we describe it as an aspirational practice because, of course, we are domesticated and we do have all the privileges and benefits of our institutions, but somehow that, what feral feminist thinkers might talk about, the liminal position, which is in and out at the same time. We might be in and of our institutions, but not in them and not of them. And somehow we're looking to queer and feminist scholars to really help us kind of cope with that liminal positionality and at least aspire to being feral. So we hope you enjoy the book. Hope lots of you are going to buy it this evening, and we didn't have a glass to raise, but let's say that we're raising a glass to you all there.
Hi, my name is Anissa. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be a part of this excellent edited volume. My chapter, Fight the Patriarchy, Digital Feminist Public Pedagogy and Post-Feminist Media Culture in Indonesia, analyzes a popular young feminist account online called Lawan Patriarki, or Fight the Patriarchy. It proposes that we should defer generalizing the label post-feminist to social media accounts who seem to lack coherence or seem ambivalent about their feminism. I propose instead that we look into the cultural, historical, and socio-political settings that condition how they do feminism. The chapter also suggests the significance of digital feminist public pedagogy as a new site of learning for young people to challenge the dominant public discourse about gender and sexuality. Thank you.